The moment I opened my front door that January morning and saw Brenda Patterson standing there with her clipboard and that insufferable smile, I knew my peaceful Saturday in Boulder, Colorado was about to go sideways. "Xavier Ingram," she said, my full name rolling off her tongue like an accusation. "We need to discuss your responsibilities to the Pinewood Ridge Homeowners Association." I had moved into this subdivision 6 months ago, thinking it would be perfect. The house was beautiful, the mountain views were spectacular, and the neighborhood seemed quiet. What I hadn't counted on was Brenda, the HOA president who treated her volunteer position like she was running a small dictatorship. "Good morning, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "What can I do for you?" She thrust a packet of papers at me. "As you're aware, we had 18 inches of snow last night. According to Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws, all homeowners are required to clear snow from common areas adjacent to their property within 24 hours of snowfall cessation." I took the papers and flipped through them. "Brenda, I've already cleared my driveway and walkway. What more do you want?" Her smile tightened. "The common area in question is the shared driveway easement that runs between your property and the Hendersons next door. It's technically HOA property, but since it borders your lot, you're responsible for maintenance." "That's a 50-foot stretch of driveway," I said, "and it doesn't even lead to my house." "Nevertheless, the bylaws are clear. You have until tomorrow at noon to complete the work, or you'll face a fine of $200 per day until compliance is achieved." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Oh, and there's one more thing." Of course there was. "The parking area at the end of Cedar Lane, near the community mailboxes. That also borders your property line on the eastern side. It needs to be cleared as well." I stared at her. "Brenda, that parking area serves 6 houses. Why am I solely responsible for clearing it?" "Because," she said, enunciating each word like I was a slow child, "your property line extends to that area. The bylaws don't care how many people use it. They care about property boundaries and responsibility." I looked past her at the neighborhood. The main roads had been plowed by the county early this morning, but the smaller streets and driveways were still buried. Most of my neighbors were out with their snowblowers and shovels, working on their own properties. "Fine," I said. "I'll take care of it." "Wonderful," Brenda said. "I knew you'd see reason. Just remember, tomorrow at noon is the deadline." After she left, I stood in my doorway fuming. I had bought a house in an HOA neighborhood against my better judgment, and now I was paying the price. My father had warned me. "HOAs are just small-town tyrants with nothing better to do," he had said. I should have listened. I spent the next 3 hours clearing the shared driveway and the parking area. My snowblower groaned and sputtered as I pushed it back and forth, creating neat paths through the deep snow. My arms ached, my face was numb from the cold, and I was sweating despite the 20-degree temperature. When I finished, I took photos of everything with my phone, documenting the work. I had learned early on that with Brenda, you needed proof of everything. I was putting my snowblower away when my neighbor, Mike Henderson, walked over. He was a retired engineer in his 60s, one of the few people in the neighborhood who seemed sane. "Hey, Xavier, saw you out here working. That was a lot of snow to move." "Yeah, Brenda paid me a visit this morning." "Apparently I'm responsible for clearing the shared areas." Mike frowned. "That doesn't sound right. I've lived here 8 years, and we've always rotated that responsibility. Different houses take turns each storm." "Well, apparently the bylaws say otherwise." "Let me see those papers she gave you." I retrieved them from inside, and Mike studied them carefully, his engineer's mind analyzing every detail. "This is interesting," he said after a few minutes. She's citing Section 7, Paragraph 4, but she's interpreting it wrong. It says property owners are responsible for areas directly adjacent and primarily serving their property. That shared driveway serves my house just as much as yours, and that parking area, it serves everyone on this whole side of the development. So what should I do? Come to the next HOA meeting. It's this Wednesday at 7. Bring these papers and challenge her interpretation. The bylaws also say that any property owner can request a board vote on bylaw interpretations. I thanked Mike and went inside. The rest of Saturday passed quietly, but Sunday morning brought a new surprise. I was drinking coffee and watching the news when I heard a loud knocking. I opened the door to find Brenda again, but this time she wasn't alone. She had brought 2 other board members, Karen Whitmore and Susan Chen. "Xavier Ingram," Brenda said formally, "we're here to conduct an inspection of your snow-clearing work. I cleared everything you asked for yesterday. We'll be the judge of that." The 3 women marched around my property, checking the driveway and parking area. I followed them, growing increasingly irritated. "This is inadequate," Brenda announced, pointing at the parking area. "There's still snow along the edges. That's the pile from what I cleared. The snow has to go somewhere. The bylaws require complete clearing. This violates the standards." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I had taken. "I cleared it properly. What you're looking at is the natural result of plowing. The snow gets pushed to the sides." Karen Whitmore, a woman in her 50s with short blonde hair, shook her head. "The parking spaces must be completely accessible. This is a safety issue." "It is accessible. Look, you can clearly see the parking spots." "We'll need to issue a citation," Susan Chen said, writing something on her tablet. $200 for inadequate snow removal." "This is ridiculous," I said. "I spent 3 hours clearing that area. It's perfectly fine." "You have the right to appeal at the next board meeting," Brenda said. "Wednesday at 7. Until then, the fine stands, and it will increase by $200 each day until the work meets our standards." After they left, I called Mike Henderson and told him what happened. "That's absolutely out of line," Mike said. "They're harassing you. Listen, come over tonight. I want to show you something." That evening, I went to Mike's house. His wife Janet was there, along with 2 other neighbors I recognized but hadn't met formally, Tom Richardson and his wife Paula. "Xavier, thanks for coming," Mike said. "Janet and I have been talking with Tom and Paula. We've all had problems with Brenda over the years, but this situation with you is the worst we've seen." Tom, a man in his 40s with graying hair, nodded. "She tried to fine me $500 last year because my fence was supposedly 6 inches too tall. I had to hire a surveyor to prove it was within the legal height limit. She made us repaint our house," Paula added. "Said the color wasn't on the approved list, cost us $4,000, but when we checked the original bylaws there was no approved color list. She had just made one up." "Here's what I wanted to show you," Mike said, pulling out a thick binder. "These are the original HOA bylaws from when this development was built 12 years ago. I served on the board back then, so I kept copies of everything." He opened to a marked page. "Section 7, Paragraph 4. Read it yourself." I read the passage carefully. Mike was right. The bylaw stated that homeowners were responsible for snow removal on areas directly adjacent and primarily serving their property. The key word was primarily. The shared driveway primarily served Mike's house, not mine. The parking area primarily served the entire block. "She's deliberately misinterpreting the bylaws," I said. "Worse than that," Janet said. "Show him the amendment section." Mike flipped to another page. 3 years ago, Brenda became HOA president. 6 months later, she held a vote to amend certain bylaws. But here's the thing. The amendment vote didn't meet quorum. You need 60% of homeowners to approve bylaw changes. She only got 42%. So the amendments aren't valid. Exactly. But she's been enforcing them anyway. Most people don't know the difference, and those who questioned it either moved away or gave up fighting. Why didn't you challenge her? Mike sighed. I tried. 2 years ago, I filed a formal complaint with the board. Brenda dismissed it, and Karen and Susan backed her up. They're all friends. The board is supposed to have 5 members, but 2 positions have been vacant for 18 months. Brenda claims nobody wants to serve, but really, she just refuses to hold elections. Tom leaned forward. Here's what we're thinking. Wednesday's board meeting is open to all homeowners. If enough of us show up and demand action, we can force a vote. With the original bylaws on our side, we can prove she's been operating outside her authority. What about my fine? I asked. Don't pay it, Paula said firmly. If you pay, you're acknowledging that her interpretation is correct. Fight it at the meeting. I left Mike's house feeling better. At least I wasn't alone in this, but I also felt angry. How had Brenda gotten away with this for so long? Monday morning, I took the day off work. I'm a software developer, and my company is flexible about remote work and scheduling. I spent the morning researching Colorado HOA law, learning everything I could about homeowner rights and board responsibilities. What I discovered was enlightening. Colorado has strict laws governing HOAs, including requirements for financial transparency, election procedures, and dispute resolution. From what I could tell, Pinewood Ridge HOA was violating at least a dozen regulations. Around 2 in the afternoon, I got an email from the HOA. It was from Brenda's official account, with Karen and Susan copied. Dear Mr. Ingram, this email serves as formal notice that your snow removal citation fine has increased to $400 due to continued non-compliance. Additionally, you are now cited for failure to maintain landscaping standards, as your front yard contains excessive snow accumulation that has not been distributed according to drainage requirements. This citation carries an additional fine of $300. Both fines will increase by $200 per day until compliance is achieved. Payment is due within 30 days to avoid legal action. I read the email 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. Failure to maintain landscaping standards. There was 18 inches of snow everywhere. What did she expect me to do with it? I forwarded the email to Mike, Tom, Paula, and Janet, along with several other neighbors whose contact information I had gotten the night before. Mike called me immediately. This is insane. She's escalating because she knows you're going to fight her at the meeting. She wants to intimidate you. It's not going to work, I said. I'm not paying a cent. Good. But Xavier, be prepared. Brenda doesn't like being challenged. She's going to make things difficult. Mike had no idea how right he was. Tuesday morning brought another surprise. I went outside to warm up my car and found a bright orange sticker plastered across my driver's side window. It was an official-looking notice from the Pinewood Ridge HOA, declaring my vehicle in violation of parking regulations for being parked in my own driveway for more than 72 consecutive hours. I stared at it in disbelief. My car was in my driveway. My driveway. Where else would I park it? I took photos of the sticker and the car's position, then carefully peeled it off. The adhesive left a sticky residue that took 10 minutes and half a bottle of window cleaner to remove. This was harassment, pure and simple. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was David Morton, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Boulder, and he agreed to see me the next morning before the board meeting. Bring all your documentation, he said. Emails, photos, bylaws, everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brenda's tactics, about how she had intimidated other homeowners into compliance. But I also thought about Mike and the others who were willing to stand up. We had a chance to change things. Wednesday morning, I met with David Morton. His office was modern and professional, with framed certifications covering one wall. He was in his early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I spent 90 minutes walking him through everything. Brenda's initial demand, the snow-clearing work I had done, the citation, the escalating fines, the parking sticker. I showed him the original bylaws Mike had provided and the emails from Brenda. David listened carefully, taking notes on his laptop. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Ingram, you have an extremely strong case. This HOA is operating in clear violation of Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 38, Article 33.3, which governs common interest communities. The board's failure to maintain proper elections, the invalid bylaw amendments, the harassment, the arbitrary fines, all of it is actionable. What should I do? Tonight's meeting is crucial. You need to formally challenge the fines and demand a proper board vote. I'm going to draft a letter that you can read into the record. This letter will put the board on notice that any continued harassment will result in legal action. It will also demand a full audit of HOA finances and proper elections within 60 days. Will that work? It depends on how reasonable they are. Some boards back down immediately when faced with legal pressure. Others double down. Based on what you've told me, Brenda Patterson sounds like the doubling down type. So what happens then? Then we file suit. We can seek an injunction against the fines, demand compliance with state law, and possibly seek damages for harassment. But that's expensive and time-consuming. Let's hope tonight's meeting resolves things. David spent the next hour drafting the letter. It was 2 pages of dense legal language that basically said, "Stop harassing my client or face serious legal consequences." He printed 3 copies, one for me to keep, one to submit to the board, and one for my records. "One more thing," David said as I was leaving. "Document everything that happens tonight. If you can record the meeting, do it. Colorado is a one-party consent state, so you're legally allowed to record conversations you're part of." I left his office feeling prepared but nervous. Tonight would be a turning point one way or another. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. I arrived at 6:45 and found the parking lot already half full. Mike, Janet, Tom, and Paula were waiting for me near the entrance. "Big turnout tonight," Mike said. "Word got around about what's happening. A lot of people are fed up." We walked in together. The meeting room was set up with several rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Brenda was in the center, with Karen Whitmore on her left and Susan Chen on her right. About 30 other residents were scattered throughout the room, far more than usually attended. I took a seat in the front row, with Mike and the others beside me. Brenda watched me with cold eyes, her expression unreadable. At exactly 7, Brenda called the meeting to order by banging a small gavel on the table. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January meeting of the Pinewood Ridge Homeowners Association Board. We have several items on tonight's agenda, including budget approval, landscaping proposals, and enforcement updates." She went through the standard opening procedures, reading minutes from the last meeting and discussing various mundane issues. I waited, my copy of David's letter folded in my jacket pocket. Finally, Brenda reached the enforcement updates section. "We have several ongoing compliance issues to discuss. First, Property 1407 Cedar Lane has received multiple citations for inadequate snow removal and landscaping violations. The current fine total is $700 and continues to increase daily. I'd like to address that, I said, standing up. Brenda's expression soured. There's a public comment period at the end of the meeting, Mr. Ingram. Please wait your turn. Actually, Mike said, also standing, according to the bylaws, any homeowner has the right to immediately address enforcement actions against their property. Section 12, paragraph 2. Brenda's jaw tightened. Very well, Mr. Ingram, you have 3 minutes. I pulled out David's letter and began reading. The room fell silent as I went through each point. The invalid bylaw amendments, the misinterpretation of snow removal responsibilities, the harassment through escalating fines, the violation of Colorado state law regarding HOA governance. This letter serves as formal notice that any continued harassment will result in legal action against the board, both in their official capacity and personally, I concluded. I am demanding that all fines be immediately rescinded, that proper board elections be held within 60 days, and that a full financial audit be conducted by an independent third party. I am also formally requesting a board vote on the interpretation of Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the bylaws regarding snow removal responsibilities. I placed a copy of the letter on the table in front of Brenda. The room erupted in conversation. Several people started talking at once, some in support, others in confusion. Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! This is highly irregular. Mr. Ingram, you cannot simply come in here and make demands backed by legal threats. Actually, he can, said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A man I didn't recognize had stood up. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. My name is Richard Coleman. I'm an attorney and I live at property 2212 Aspen Court. I've been a member of this community for 6 years, and I've watched this board operate with increasing concern. Mr. Ingram is absolutely correct in his assessment. This board has been violating state law for years. Brenda's face turned red. Mr. Coleman, unless you're here in an official legal capacity, your opinions are not relevant. I'm here as a concerned homeowner, and I'm formally seconding Mr. Ingram's request for a board vote on the bylaw interpretation. According to Section 12, Paragraph 5, any motion seconded by a homeowner must be voted on immediately. Brenda looked at Karen and Susan, clearly flustered. This was not going according to her plan. The board will need time to review this request and consult with our attorney, Brenda said. No, Richard said firmly. The bylaws are clear. Seconded motions must be voted on at the current meeting, unless you're admitting that you don't actually follow the bylaws you claim to enforce. The room buzzed with conversation again. I could see Brenda calculating her options. She was trapped. If she refused to hold the vote, she would be admitting that the board didn't follow proper procedures. If she held the vote, she risked losing. Fine, Brenda said icily. We'll vote on the interpretation of Section 7, Paragraph 4. The question is whether homeowner Xavier Ingram is solely responsible for snow removal in the shared driveway and parking area adjacent to his property. She looked at Karen and Susan. I vote that the current interpretation is correct and Mr. Ingram is responsible. Karen nodded. I also vote that he's responsible. Susan hesitated, glancing at the crowd. I vote that the interpretation needs clarification. I think we should consult with the HOA attorney before making a final determination. That's not an option, Richard called out. The vote is yes or no on the current interpretation. Susan looked uncomfortable. Then I vote no. I don't think the bylaw is as clear as we've been assuming." The room fell silent. It was a tie, 1 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention that had been forced into a no. "The motion fails," Mike said, "which means the current enforcement is invalid and the fines must be rescinded." Brenda stood up abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned. The board will reconvene in private session to discuss these matters." "You can't adjourn in the middle of the agenda," someone shouted, but Brenda was already walking toward a side door with Karen following. Susan remained at the table, looking miserable. The room descended into chaos. People were shouting questions, demanding answers. Mike, Richard, and I gathered near the front. "That went better than I expected," Richard said. "The vote failing means they can't enforce those fines. If they try, it's clear harassment." "What do we do now?" I asked. "We wait. Brenda's going to regroup and come back harder. But you've got a lot of support here. And with Susan breaking ranks, the board's unity is cracking." Over the next few days, the neighborhood was consumed with gossip and speculation. I heard through Mike that Brenda had called an emergency board meeting the day after the public meeting, but Susan hadn't attended. Rumors spread that Susan was considering resigning from the board. I didn't hear anything official from the HOA, which I took as a good sign. The fines seemed to have stopped, at least for now. Then, Friday afternoon, everything exploded. I came home from running errands to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, informing me that a lien had been placed on my property for $700 in unpaid HOA fines, plus $300 in administrative fees and legal costs. I called David Morton immediately. "They actually placed a lien," he said, his voice incredulous. "After the vote failed and you gave them legal notice, that's incredibly stupid on their part." "What do I do?" "File a challenge to the lien immediately. I'll handle it, but Xavier, this is good news for us. They just handed us a clear-cut case of harassment and abuse of authority. We're going to file suit and we're going to win." That evening, Mike called an unofficial neighborhood meeting at his house. About 15 people showed up, cramming into his living room. The mood was angry and determined. "Brenda's gone too far this time," Tom said. "A lien on Xavier's property. That affects his credit, his ability to sell or refinance. That's serious harm. We need to force her out," Paula added. "Hold a special election, remove the entire board, start over." Richard Coleman had also come. "I've been reviewing the bylaws and state law. Here's what we can do. According to Colorado statute, if 20% of homeowners sign a petition, they can force a special meeting to recall board members. Pinewood Ridge has 83 homes, so we need 17 signatures." "I'll sign right now," I said. "Me too," Mike added. Within 30 minutes, we had 12 signatures from people in the room. Richard created a simple petition form on his laptop and printed copies for everyone to take to their neighbors. "We need to move fast," Richard said. "Once Brenda hears about this, she'll try to interfere. Get those signatures over the weekend if possible." Saturday and Sunday were a blur of door knocking and conversations. I talked to neighbors I had never met, sharing my story and explaining what Brenda had done. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Many people had their own horror stories about the HOA. By Sunday evening, we had 32 signatures, nearly double what we needed. Richard filed the petition Monday morning with the HOA's registered agent. According to the bylaws, the board had to schedule a special meeting within 21 days. That Monday afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "You're making a big mistake. Drop this now or you'll regret it." I showed it to David Morton when I met with him to discuss the lien challenge. "That's potentially criminal harassment," David said. "Save that message. If you get any more, forward them to me immediately. Also, consider filing a police report. Is that really necessary? Xavier, when people feel cornered, they sometimes do desperate things. Brenda Patterson has built her identity around controlling this HOA. You're threatening that. Be careful. I filed a police report that evening at the Boulder Police Department. The officer who took my statement was professional but didn't seem overly concerned. It's probably just someone trying to scare you, he said, but we'll document it. If anything escalates, call us immediately. Tuesday brought another massive snowstorm. 22 inches fell overnight, the biggest storm of the season. I woke up to a winter wonderland and spent the morning clearing my driveway and walkway. I deliberately did not clear the shared driveway or parking area. According to the failed board vote, I wasn't responsible for those areas. Around noon, I looked out my window and saw Brenda's car stuck in the parking area. She was spinning her wheels, unable to get traction in the deep snow. The parking area hadn't been plowed or cleared by anyone. I watched for a few minutes, feeling a petty sense of satisfaction. Then my conscience got the better of me. I put on my coat and boots and went outside. Need some help, I called out. Brenda glared at me through her windshield. I need you to do your job and clear this parking area like you're supposed to. Actually, according to the board vote last week, I'm not responsible for that area. The interpretation of the bylaw was rejected. That vote was invalid. I'm the HOA president and I'm telling you to clear this area immediately. Not going to happen, Brenda. You want it cleared, you clear it yourself, or hire someone. I turned and walked back to my house, ignoring her shouts behind me. An hour later, I got an email from the HOA attorney, a man named Gregory Fisher. The email stated that the previous board vote was being declared invalid due to procedural irregularities, and that all enforcement actions were being reinstated. My fines were now at $1,300 and counting. I forwarded the email to David Morton with a simple message. They're not backing down. David replied within minutes. Neither are we. I'm filing the lawsuit tomorrow. Wednesday morning, David filed a complaint in Boulder County District Court. The lawsuit named Brenda Patterson, Karen Whitmore, Susan Chen, and the Pinewood Ridge HOA as defendants. It alleged harassment, abuse of authority, violations of Colorado HOA law, and wrongful lien placement. It sought injunctive relief, damages, and attorney's fees. The lawsuit made local news. A reporter from the Boulder Daily Camera called me for a comment. I kept it simple. I just want the HOA to follow the law and treat homeowners fairly. The story ran Thursday morning with the headline, Boulder homeowner sues HOA over snow removal dispute. It included quotes from me, from David Morton, and from Brenda, who said, "This lawsuit is frivolous and motivated by one homeowner's refusal to fulfill his basic community obligations." The story spread on social media. I started getting supportive messages from people all over Boulder County who had their own HOA horror stories. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Susan Chen. "Mr. Ingram, this is Susan Chen from the HOA board. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Can we meet in person?" I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Boulder that evening. I told David Morton about the meeting, and he advised me to record it. Susan was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea. She looked tired and stressed. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to tell you something. Go ahead. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately. I can't be part of what Brenda's doing anymore. This situation with you was the final straw. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what Brenda's planning. She's not going to let this go. She's talking about countersuing you for legal fees, for defamation, for anything she can think of. She's also been using HOA funds to pay for her attorney without proper board authorization. That's illegal. I know. That's one of the reasons I'm resigning. I don't want to be liable when everything comes out. Susan reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. This contains copies of all HOA financial records for the past 3 years, including emails and documents that show how Brenda's been managing things. I probably shouldn't be giving this to you, but I think someone needs to see what's really been going on. I took the USB drive. Why are you doing this? Because I moved into this neighborhood thinking I was joining a community. Instead, I joined Brenda's personal kingdom. I've watched her bully people for years. I went along with it because it was easier than fighting, but I'm done. What she's doing to you is wrong, and I'm not going to be complicit anymore. We talked for another 30 minutes. Susan explained how Brenda had systematically consolidated power, how she had driven away anyone who questioned her, how she had manipulated board votes and financial decisions. It was worse than I had imagined. When I left the coffee shop, I went straight to David Morton's office. He was working late, preparing for a hearing the next day. I handed him the USB drive and explained what Susan had told me. David plugged it into his computer and started reviewing the files. His eyes widened as he scrolled through documents. "Xavier, this is explosive. Look at this." He turned the screen toward me. "Brenda's been paying herself a monthly stipend of $500 from HOA funds. That's not authorized anywhere in the bylaws or budget. That's embezzlement." "How much total if she's been doing this for 3 years?" David calculated quickly. $18,000, maybe more. We spent the next 2 hours going through the files. The picture that emerged was damning. Brenda had been treating the HOA like her personal piggy bank. Unauthorized payments to herself, excessive legal fees for minor issues, contracts with vendors who gave her kickbacks. She had also been selectively enforcing rules, fining people she didn't like while ignoring violations by her friends. "We need to go to the police," David said. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is criminal fraud and embezzlement." Friday morning, we met with Detective Sarah Mills at the Boulder Police Department. She was a financial crimes investigator, a serious woman in her 40s with sharp questions and careful note-taking. We presented everything: the USB drive, the HOA records, Susan Chen's statement, the pattern of harassment and abuse. Detective Mills reviewed the materials carefully. "This is definitely something we need to investigate," she said. "I'll need to verify these documents and interview witnesses, but based on what you've shown me, there's probable cause to believe multiple crimes have been committed." "How long will that take?" I asked. "Hard to say. Financial investigations can be complex, but I'll start immediately. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. If Miss Patterson or anyone else contacts you, make a record of it." The investigation moved quickly. Detective Mills was thorough and efficient. She interviewed Susan Chen, Mike Henderson, Richard Coleman, and several other homeowners. She subpoenaed bank records and HOA financial statements. She reviewed emails and contracts. Meanwhile, the special meeting for the recall vote was scheduled for the following Wednesday, exactly 21 days after the petition was filed. The weekend before the meeting, I got another threatening text. "You're destroying this neighborhood. Everything that happens now is on you." I forwarded it to Detective Mills and to David Morton. The texts were coming from a disposable phone, making them hard to trace, but they established a pattern of harassment. Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. The next day would determine the future of the HOA and possibly my ability to live peacefully in my own home. Wednesday arrived cold and clear. The special meeting was scheduled for 7 in the evening, once again at the community center. I arrived early with Mike, Janet, Tom, Paula, and Richard Coleman. The parking lot was packed. It seemed like almost every homeowner in the neighborhood had come. The meeting room was standing room only, with people lining the walls and spilling into the hallway. Brenda sat at the board table with Karen Whitmore. Susan's seat was empty. Brenda looked composed, but I could see tension in her shoulders. At exactly 7, Brenda called the meeting to order. This special meeting has been called to address a petition for board member recall. Before we proceed, I want to state for the record that this recall is based on false accusations and personal vendettas. The current board has served this community faithfully, and this attempt to remove us is deeply unfair. "Let's just get to the vote," someone called out. Richard Coleman stood up. "According to the bylaws, recall votes must be conducted by secret ballot. I move that we proceed with the voting immediately." "Seconded," said at least 5 people simultaneously. Brenda had no choice. Ballot papers were distributed, and people marked their votes. Yes to recall Brenda Patterson and Karen Whitmore, or no to keep them in their positions. The counting took 20 minutes. Richard Coleman and 2 other volunteer homeowners tallied the results while everyone waited in tense silence. Finally, Richard stood up and announced the results. For Brenda Patterson, 53 votes yes to recall, 12 votes no. For Karen Whitmore, 51 votes yes to recall, 14 votes no. The recall is successful. Both board members are immediately removed from their positions. The room erupted in applause. Brenda's face went white, then red. She stood up abruptly, grabbed her belongings, and stormed toward the exit. Karen followed her, looking shell-shocked. "This isn't over," Brenda shouted before slamming the door, but it was. A week later, Detective Mills made her arrest. Brenda Patterson was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. The charges carried potential prison time. Karen Whitmore was also charged as an accomplice, though her charges were less severe since prosecutors believed Brenda had been the primary actor. The arrests made bigger news than the lawsuit had. The story ran on Denver television stations and in newspapers throughout Colorado. HOA reform advocates used our case as an example of why stronger oversight was needed. David Morton's lawsuit was settled out of court. The HOA's insurance company agreed to pay damages and attorney's fees, and all fines against me were permanently rescinded. The lien was removed from my property. A new HOA board was elected in February. Mike Henderson became president with Richard Coleman as vice president. They immediately implemented reforms: transparent budgets, regular audits, fair enforcement procedures, and term limits for board members. The shared driveway and parking area maintenance was restructured so that all adjacent homeowners took turns, rotating responsibility each storm. It was fair, it was reasonable, and it followed the actual bylaws. Susan Chen avoided charges by cooperating fully with the investigation. She provided testimony and documents that helped secure convictions against Brenda and Karen. The criminal trial took place in August. I attended the sentencing hearing along with several other homeowners who had been victimized by Brenda's schemes. The judge was not sympathetic. "Miss Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. Instead of serving your neighbors, you exploited them for personal gain. You stole money, you harassed people, and you abused your authority repeatedly. This court takes such violations very seriously." Brenda was sentenced to 18 months in prison plus restitution and probation. Karen received 6 months plus restitution. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was finally over. I still live in Pinewood Ridge. The neighborhood is different now, calmer and friendlier. People actually talk to each other instead of living in fear of HOA citations. The community center hosts regular events, and the new board focuses on genuine community building rather than petty enforcement. Mike Henderson turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He's fair, transparent, and actually listens to homeowners. Under his leadership, the HOA has become what it was always supposed to be: a way to maintain common areas and organize neighborhood activities, not a tool for control and harassment. Richard Coleman and I became good friends. He helped several other homeowners in the neighborhood resolve long-standing disputes that Brenda had created. His legal expertise and willingness to stand up made a huge difference. Last winter, we got another major snowstorm. 20 inches overnight, beautiful and peaceful. I cleared my driveway and walkway, then helped my elderly neighbor Mrs. Thompson clear hers. Tom Richardson and I tag-teamed the shared driveway between our properties, working together and sharing coffee afterward. That's how it should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, not because some power-hungry board president demanded it, but because it's the right thing to do. The parking area near the mailboxes was cleared by a group of residents working together, laughing and joking as they shoveled. Someone brought hot chocolate. It turned into an impromptu social gathering, kids having snowball fights while adults cleared paths. I stood in the cold morning air, watching my neighbors work together, and thought about how different everything was from that first confrontation with Brenda in my doorway. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it's difficult and scary. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it would be easier to just go along. And sometimes when you stand up, you discover that you're not alone, that other people have been waiting for someone to take the first step. The HOA demanded I clear snow from their driveways. I refused, and in doing so, I helped clear away something much more toxic than snow. I helped clear away corruption, abuse, and fear. And in the end, that made all the difference. The neighborhood learned an important lesson from everything that happened. HOAs are only as good or as bad as the people running them. When residents stay informed, participate in meetings, and hold board members accountable, HOAs can actually enhance a community. But when people become apathetic and let a small group consolidate power without oversight, problems inevitably arise. We made sure that wouldn't happen again in Pinewood Ridge. The new board established quarterly town halls where any homeowner could raise concerns or suggest improvements. Financial statements were posted online every month, completely transparent. Major decisions required community input, not just board votes. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements about rules and priorities. But those disagreements were handled fairly and openly, not through intimidation and arbitrary enforcement. My life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after becoming the public face of HOA resistance. I still got occasional messages from people dealing with their own HOA problems, asking for advice. I always told them the same thing: document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight back when the HOA overreaches. David Morton used our case as a teaching example. He gave presentations at legal conferences about HOA abuse and homeowner rights. He helped draft legislation in Colorado to strengthen HOA oversight and protect residents from exactly the kind of treatment I had experienced. Susan Chen moved away from Pinewood Ridge 6 months after everything ended. She told me she needed a fresh start, somewhere without the memories of what had happened. I understood. Being part of Brenda's schemes, even reluctantly, had taken a toll on her. She did the right thing in the end, but she had to live with the choices she made before that. I think about Susan sometimes. She wasn't a villain, just someone who took the easy path until she couldn't live with herself anymore. There are probably thousands of Susan Chens on HOA boards across America, going along with unreasonable precedents and policies because standing up seems too hard. I hope our story reached some of them. I hope it showed them that speaking up matters, that providing evidence of wrongdoing matters, that choosing conscience over convenience matters. Brenda Patterson served her sentence and was released after 14 months with good behavior. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to Arizona to live with her sister. I hope she learned something from the experience, though I doubt it. People like Brenda rarely believe they've done anything wrong, even when faced with overwhelming evidence. Karen Whitmore also moved away after her release. I never learned where she went, and I didn't particularly care. She was less culpable than Brenda, but she had still participated in years of harassment and abuse. The housing market in Boulder remained strong, and Pinewood Ridge became known as a well-managed community with a reasonable HOA. Property values actually increased after the board changes, as buyers learned that the neighborhood had reformed its governance. My own property, once threatened with a wrongful lien, became my peaceful sanctuary. I renovated the kitchen, added a home office for my remote work, and built a deck overlooking the mountain views. I was investing in a place where I actually wanted to stay, rather than plotting my escape like I had been during the Brenda era. I met someone too. Her name was Beth Porter, and she was a graphic designer who lived 3 streets over. We met at one of the community center events that the new board organized. She had moved to Pinewood Ridge just after everything with Brenda concluded, so she missed the drama but benefited from the reforms. When I told her the full story of what had happened, she was amazed. "You basically took down a criminal organization disguised as an HOA," she said. "That's incredible. It wasn't just me. It took a lot of people working together. But you were the one who refused to back down when she first came after you. That takes courage." Maybe it did. Or maybe I was just stubborn enough to fight rather than accept unfair treatment. Either way, I was glad I had done it. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, home, time with Beth, occasional neighborhood gatherings. It was the peaceful suburban existence I had wanted when I first bought the house. But I never forgot the lessons I learned. I stayed involved with the HOA, attending meetings and voting on important issues. I made sure the new board stayed accountable and transparent. Vigilance, I learned, was the price of maintaining a functional community organization. Other homeowners took the same approach. Meeting attendance remained high, even for routine discussions. People paid attention to finances and decisions. The culture of the HOA had fundamentally changed from authoritarian enforcement to collaborative community management. 2 years after Brenda's arrest, I was invited to speak at a homeowners' rights conference in Denver. The organizers wanted me to share my experience and the lessons learned. I was nervous about public speaking, but David Morton encouraged me to do it. "Your story has power," he said. "It shows people that they don't have to accept abuse from their HOA. It shows them that the system works if you're willing to use it." I gave the presentation to an audience of about 200 people, mostly homeowners dealing with their own HOA disputes. I walked them through everything: Brenda's initial demand, the snow removal controversy, the escalating harassment, the decision to fight back, the discovery of financial crimes, and the ultimate resolution. During the question and answer session, people wanted practical advice. "How did you afford a lawyer?" one man asked. I was fortunate to have some savings, and David Morton was willing to work on contingency for part of his fee. But there are also legal aid organizations and HOA reform groups that can help. You don't have to face this alone. What if your HOA retaliates while you're fighting them? A woman asked. Document everything. Every email, every fine, every interaction. Create a paper trail that proves harassment. And don't be afraid to involve the police if things cross into criminal behavior. What if you can't get enough neighbors to support you? Start small. Find one or two allies and build from there. Share information, help people understand what's really happening. In my case, many neighbors had their own grievances but felt powerless individually. Coming together made us strong. The presentation was well received. Afterward, dozens of people came up to share their own HOA horror stories and thank me for speaking out. It was eye-opening to realize how widespread these problems were. I left the conference feeling like the ordeal I had gone through had purpose beyond just resolving my own situation. If my experience helped even a few other people stand up to HOA abuse, then all the stress and conflict had been worthwhile. Back in Pinewood Ridge, life continued smoothly. The seasons changed, storms came and went, and the neighborhood functioned the way it was supposed to. When snow fell, people cleared their own areas and helped their neighbors. When disputes arose, they were resolved through discussion rather than arbitrary fines. Mike Henderson served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down, satisfied that the organization was on stable footing. Richard Coleman took over, continuing the reforms and adding new community programs. The vacant board positions that Brenda had never filled were now occupied by engaged homeowners who actually wanted to serve their community. Elections were held annually, with multiple candidates competing for positions. It was democracy in action, on the smallest scale but still meaningful. I eventually joined the board myself, serving as treasurer. I implemented financial controls and transparency measures to ensure that what Brenda had done could never happen again. Every expenditure over $100 required board approval. All financial records were audited annually by an independent accountant. Monthly financial summaries were posted on the HOA website. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was important. Building trust in an organization that had been so thoroughly corrupted took time and consistent effort. Beth and I got engaged 3 years after we met. We decided to stay in Pinewood Ridge in the house that I had fought so hard to keep. It had become more than just a property to me. It represented standing up for what was right, refusing to be bullied, and building something better. We got married in the community center, surrounded by neighbors who had become genuine friends. Mike Henderson officiated, having gotten ordained online for the occasion. Richard Coleman gave a toast about community and perseverance. Even Mrs. Thompson, my elderly neighbor, attended and told embarrassing stories about my snow shoveling technique. It was perfect, a celebration not just of Beth and me, but of the community we had all built together. As I stood there, looking at the smiling faces of my neighbors, I thought about that January morning years ago when Brenda Patterson had knocked on my door with her clipboard and her demands. I thought about how angry and frustrated I had felt, how the situation had seemed hopeless. But it hadn't been hopeless. Change was possible when people chose to act rather than accept the unacceptable. The story of Pinewood Ridge HOA became a cautionary tale in Colorado and beyond. The case was cited in law review articles and HOA reform legislation. Other communities used our reforms as a template for their own governance improvements. Brenda Patterson became shorthand for HOA corruption. Her name invoked whenever discussions turned to the need for oversight and accountability in community associations. I sometimes wondered if she understood the impact she had, though probably not in the way she imagined. She had wanted control and power. Instead, her abuse of that power sparked reforms that made communities better and made it harder for future Brendas to operate unchecked. There's a certain irony in that. Years later, when I look back on everything that happened, I'm struck by how a simple dispute over snow removal escalated into something so much larger. But that's often how these things work. The snow was never really about snow. It was about power, control, and whether one person could arbitrarily dictate terms to her neighbors without consequences. The answer, it turned out, was no. Not without consequences. Pinewood Ridge today bears little resemblance to the place I moved into all those years ago. The physical neighborhood is the same, but the culture is completely different. People wave to each other. They organize block parties and holiday celebrations. They work together on community projects. The HOA still exists, still maintains common areas and enforces reasonable rules. But it does so fairly and transparently, as a service to homeowners rather than as a tool of control. That's all I ever wanted. Not the elimination of rules or shared responsibility, but fairness and respect. The recognition that homeowners are stakeholders in their community, not subjects to be controlled. I learned a lot through that experience. I learned that standing up for yourself matters. I learned that documentation and evidence are powerful tools. I learned that laws and procedures exist to protect people, but only if you're willing to use them. Most importantly, I learned that you're rarely as alone as you feel. When I first challenged Brenda, I thought I might be fighting by myself. Instead, I discovered dozens of neighbors who felt the same way, who were just waiting for someone to take the first step. That's perhaps the most important lesson for anyone dealing with an abusive HOA or any other institutional problem. Speak up. Share your experience. You'll be surprised how many people are thinking the same thing but were afraid to say it. The snow kept falling every winter in the Colorado mountains. Each storm brought its particular challenges and its particular beauty. But now, when I looked out at the white-covered landscape, I saw opportunity rather than conflict. Opportunity to help neighbors, to build community, to live peacefully in the home I had chosen. That January morning when Brenda first demanded I clear snow from areas I wasn't responsible for, she probably thought I would simply comply. Most people did. That's how she had operated for years, counting on compliance and passivity. But I didn't comply. I asked questions, I fought back. I refused to accept unfair treatment. And that simple refusal changed everything, not just for me but for an entire community. Sometimes the right choice is the hard choice. Sometimes standing up means conflict and stress and uncertainty. But in the end, it's worth it. Building something better is always worth the effort. Pinewood Ridge taught me that. Brenda Patterson inadvertently taught me that. And I'll carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life, grateful for what I learned even while acknowledging how difficult the learning process was. The neighborhood stands as proof that change is possible, that corruption can be defeated, and that ordinary people have more power than they realize when they choose to use it. And every time it snows, I remember. I clear my driveway, help my neighbors, and appreciate the simple act of living in a community that actually functions the way communities are supposed to. Fair, respectful, and collaborative. That's the real ending to this story. Not dramatic courtroom victories or news headlines, but the quiet satisfaction of coming home to a place where you're treated fairly and can live in peace. It's what everyone deserves from their HOA. It's what we built in Pinewood Ridge, one shovelful of snow at a time.